This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
GSMC Podcast Network. My name is Chris Blades, and before I get started here today, I want to make sure I remind you guys, as always, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode. Make sure you're always on top of when we drop our latest stuff. Also, if you could, please as well, give us a 5-star rating, write us a nice review. Be very appreciated, very helpful. See what you guys like, what you guys dislike, the ways we can improve, all that fun stuff. And also, if you're on social media, we're on social media, so you can find us there: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We can talk, we can chat, we can debate, we can discuss. And unfortunately for the MLB, there's been a lot to discuss with them, but not, well, at least recently, but not all of it has been that positive. And the most recent negative news has been that minor league baseball has had to cut hundreds of players amid the pandemic, according to different sources. This is all reported by ESPN. Hundreds of minor league players were cut Thursday, and hundreds more are expected to lose their jobs as the sport grapples with the near certainty that the minor league season will be canceled, sources told ESPN. Team officials said a vast majority of the players likely would have been released toward the end of spring training, even if baseball hadn't been halted, due to the coronavirus pandemic, all that. Obviously, you guys know all about that. But the cuts en masse, which could wind up numbering more than 1,000, nevertheless reverberated around the game, sources said. Released players expressed fear that their careers would be over, and those whose teams hadn't yet made cuts prepared for a tenuous next few days, sources said. In recent weeks, owners of minor league teams have begun laying off front office and game day workers and citing the cancellation of the season. According to sources, the minor league season has not officially been canceled, according to a spokesperson, though the suspension of professional baseball agreement that governs the minor league relationship with the major league precludes big league organizations from providing players to their minor league affiliates. The commissioner, Ron Manfred, said he would inform minor league baseball if and when players would be allowed to join affiliated teams. He has yet to do so. Even with no players available, teams are acting as if the season is over, and one team is renting out a stadium as an Airbnb. I forget. I think, is it like Pensacola? Or, yeah, I remember I saw that on like one of the, some show they were talking about renting it. Like, you could use it as an Airbnb, and I didn't understand why. But, like, now it obviously seems to make a little bit more sense, the fact that they just cut everybody, obviously, and they don't think there's going to be a season. It's like, alright, we're going to have to make money somehow. And I guess it's better uses that than just sitting there collecting dust. Well, obviously, Field's not going to collect dust, but you get the point. Minor League Baseball President Pat O'Connor has yet to speak publicly and acknowledge the foregone conclusion for 2020 and the fallout from it. He also declined to comment when ESPN reached out to him. For more than a year, MLB has planned to contract about a quarter of minor league teams before the 2021 season, compounding that with the drastically shortened amateur draft, just 5 rounds each year instead of the typical 40, and delay of international free agent signings until as late as January 15th. Minor league systems could be as thin as they've been in years. Farm directors, front office officials, agents said that further player cuts more related to the elimination of affiliates and leagues in 2021 could be expected in the future. Some of the veteran players released could compete for jobs on the anticipated 20-man taxi squad every major league team will field if the season begins, but younger players cut Thursday. Sources said might have more difficulty finding jobs in baseball. All teams agreed to pay minor leaguers $400 a week in April and May to cover wages lost because of canceled games, The $400 salary was given by MLB regardless of what the players were supposed to make. including to hundreds of players who had been contracted to make several times that. For some players, that meant a pay cut of more than 80%. Earlier this week, the Oakland A's told their minor league players that they would no longer receive the stipend starting in June, drawing significant criticism. 8 teams have said that they will pay the minor leaguers through at least June, with the San Diego Padres and the Seattle Mariners pledging to pay players through the end of August, around the time the minor league season would normally end. So, yeah. It's all kind of a mess. I mean, I basically just read through most of the articles on ESPN, but if you want to do your own research and read up on the article and read up on other articles, obviously this is the only one about this. But yeah, if you want to read up on other articles, like I said, they're all through ESPN. But yeah, minor league baseball is kind of a mess. And basically all it comes down to is just people, rich people I should say, not wanting to pay players. Because we talked about in the last episode, at least a little bit, we were talking about the MLB trying to get a bigger pay cut out of their players. We talked about how the Oakland A's, and as I mentioned in the article, how the Oakland A's said that they weren't going to pay their players through June, July, and August, their minor leaguers, and how that was criticized by me and also has been criticized by others openly. But now they're not even going to be on the. They still got mentioned in the article, but like they're not even a big deal anymore because it seems like not only are people not paying them, they're just releasing them straight up. And it's just, like I said, it's unfortunate for a lot of these players because especially the younger players, it's like, what else? Like, what do you do now? Like, again, minor leaguers in general don't typically make it to the bigs, or make it, even if they do make it to the bigs, they don't make it too big time, much as, again, you are a high-profile prospect coming through a system. Like I said, there's a lot of players within the system, or within a specific team system, that obviously don't make it up to that professional level. So, it isn't necessarily new, but just for it to happen, at least they were expecting to have a job from March, April through at least August, and then obviously whatever happens from there. But that was at least supposed to happen. Now they're going to be jobless by, like I said, not even like before the end of June. And like I said, it's like, where do you go? Like, how many of these guys will have the chance to come back and compete for spots and can be on a roster and or like make a minor league team or an affiliate, whatever, next year? Like I said, especially the younger guys, you haven't had that time to develop in the minors per se. So you don't have like a lot to go off of. Obviously, if you're a veteran guy, all right, maybe this could be your time to cut your losses and like move on to other things, which is fair. But also at the same time, at least you might have had 4, 5, 6 seasons in the minors to where you can put something, I guess on tape, or like put something on record of showing like, all right, this is what the kind of player he is. So it's easier to want to bring you back if you're, whether it's your own team or a different team that maybe happens. But if you're like a 21-year-old came out of high school, even like a 21, 22, 23-year-old that for like finished college or whatever, but as you put getting a job on the back burner to follow a professional baseball career, potentially, like, where do they go from here? It's just like it's all that's really kind of a mess. Because like, what, like, not to say like they obviously have life skills and there's things that they can do with themselves, but it's just like, do they abandon the career? Like, do they abandon the baseball career and try to find this like a regular job when they've been out? Potentially, if they're, like I said, if you're a person out of college where you've been out of the job market for 2, potentially 3 years, and a lot of these jobs and a lot of positions, especially unless you have a connection, it's going to be hard to get in on the ground floor just because you need some sort of experience, and you're going to be coming in 25, 26 with little to no experience outside of whatever maybe you potentially did in college, or maybe whatever summer jobs or off-season jobs you may have had. But I'm saying, just, it seems like it's a bad scenario for them, just because it's like their future is now completely up in the air. Obviously, the professional, like the MLB players, their future's up in the air again, because potentially they could lose up to 2 seasons. But at the end of the day, they're on a roster. They're going to get paid something. Like, it's not that big a deal. I mean, it is a big deal. Let me not say it's not that big of a deal. It's not as big of a deal compared to the minor leaguers, was my point. Obviously, it's still a big deal, as I discussed on the last podcast. I wouldn't be going for that pay cut, which we'll talk about a little bit more in the next segment. But yeah, so for a lot of these guys, their entire life is up in the air, honestly. Because like I said, do you hold out and hope that there's a... I mean, there's not really going to be a season. Even if you start in July, like, the season normally ends in, like, August. So, it's like they're not going to come back for 2 months. So, basically, like, that's done. Like, the minor league season is done. So, I'm saying, do you go and hold out hope for potentially getting a job next season? Do you wait around, or do you not wait around and just go and pursue another career path, in whatever field that may be? Like I said, it's just like now you have to making tough decisions that no one expected to be having to make, especially during a pandemic, but just potentially at all this season. And so, like I said, it's just all kind of a messed up scenario. And again, a lot of it comes down to just the rich owners not wanting to pay the minor leaguers. Because it's not like $400 a week for million and billionaires is not that much money, in theory. Now, again, minor league, or MLB and minor league baseball aren't the only people that are trying to do this. Obviously, NBA is talking about trying to cut salaries. Obviously, a lot of people have been laid off from their regular jobs out in the, I don't want to say the real world, but like their regular jobs out in the normal workforce. The people have been getting laid off, getting furloughed, whatever, just because, again, people, rich corporations, rich companies, rich people, if they can, they want to try to keep money in their own pocket as opposed to giving it out. So this situation, though, different. Even though, like I said, the money, in theory, is not really that much. As we talked about with the Oakland A's, I think it'd be somewhere around, depending on how many players are in their system, around like $1 million for the next 3 months to pay their guys. And they were just like, nah. Like, they're $2 billion worth owner now. Again, that's not liquid. That doesn't mean that he can just give away $2 billion. But he was like, nah, I'm good. They're not going to play. All right, I'm not going to pay them. And like I mentioned in the article, like the $400 already could potentially be, not for everybody, but could potentially be significantly less than they were supposed to be making during this time period anyway. So already taking a massive pay cut. And now, instead of taking a pay cut, now they're just not getting paid anything at all. And I'm just like, again, there's not other people aren't experiencing this as well. But just like I said, it's unfortunate for million and billionaires to be this cheap. But again, rich people like being rich. So if and when they can, they're going to try to keep their money for themselves. Which, I mean, I'm not rich, so I don't understand, but I get, if that makes sense. Like, I get why, or I guess I should say not get why, but I get how rich people stay rich. They try to find any sort of loophole and any sort of reason to save themselves money and keep their own money. Like, it's almost, unless you like inherited a family business, it's almost impossible to get that much money without exploiting someone, without exploiting some sort of loopholes or going around some sort of back way, doing whatever to try to keep money in your own pocket. That's just, it seems like that's what being rich is. It's just trying to find ways around the system or to game the system in order to get yourself more money. And like I said, if these owners are already going to stand to lose money on the season, and or like on a shortened season with no like gate revenue and different things, they're going to be like, all right, if we're going to lose money, then everyone is going to lose money. Even though, in theory, they're the ones that can afford to lose the money because they're supposed to be billionaires, or in a lot of cases, so they could stand to lose. Again, I don't know how much they would stand to lose, and again, I would not want to lose any amount of money, any millions of dollars, so I get that. But it's just, like I said, it's unfortunate for these players, unfortunate for, like I said, their situation, because now their whole life, literally, I mean, again, they're not alone, because everyone in this pandemic is kind of up in the air. But these guys specifically, that it didn't have to be this way, now their whole lives are up in the air, because no one really knows what the future holds for them. And they don't even know what the future holds for them. Like I said, with the possibility and likelihood that there's no season, because it's not like it's going to... Baseball, at best, is getting started sometime in July. And if the minor league season ends in August, there's literally no point. So, like I said, there's going to be no season, most likely this year. And they got to figure out something to do. And if they got to figure out if they're going to wait. If you want to wait, more power to you, God bless you. But if you don't, then I'm just like, all right, then what do you do now? Especially since now, like, and if that happens, then now minor league systems are going to be smaller for the years and years to come, because they're not going to have the people that they were supposed to have this year. The draft was shorter; they can't really sign international guys. So it's like next year's it may take a couple years for teams to be able to bolster up their farm system again, which could again, potentially hurt teams down the line in 4 or 5 years when some of these guys would have been potentially helpful to the big league club. They're just not going to be there because of this. So the ramifications of this won't really be felt for everyone. I mean, for the players, it'll be felt immediately, obviously. But for the teams and organizations, stuff like that, it may not be felt for a couple years when they realize how hard it may be to build back up that farm system. Because, again, it's not like a G League team where you have, 12, 15, how many ever guys. There are, hundreds of guys in most teams' farm systems that are just now not going to be there. And you, like I said, you hope that they're back whenever you restart this back up, whether it's this year or next year. But it's not going to be just easy to find these guys and pull them all back in, I think. Again, I could be wrong. But, like I said, the ripple effects from this will be strong. And, I mean, at the end of the day, immediately, do the owners save money? Yes. But, like I said, down the line, there could be a lot of ramifications of this. So, it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out in the years to come. But for the time being, in the immediate, in the right here and right now, it's just unfortunate for the minor league players. I feel bad for them, all because, again, teams and owners just want to be cheap and don't want to delve out a little bit of money to at least keep these guys paid. I'm not saying you have to pay them their whole salary, I get that, but just to give them something, even the $400 stipend, that's not really that much a week. That's what, $1,600 a month. There's not many places you could live where rent isn't more than that alone, and that's without any other bills, without any other expenses. Just rent alone in a lot of places is going to run you that much. So it's rough. Feel bad for those guys. Shout out to teams that are going to do right by the players, but like I said, a lot of teams aren't. So it's just a very unfortunate situation, and this whole pandemic has led to a lot of very unfortunate things. And speaking of unfortunate, the MLB players are trying to get shorted on their money, so they have reacted and talked about what their plan is next when they get back to the negotiating table. So I'll talk about that, talk about some of the players' reactions to the prospect of having their salaries cut even further than they already are going to be cut based on the prorated salaries they agreed on in March. So yeah, we'll discuss all that right after this break. Stay right there.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So as we talked about in the last podcast, MLB owners were trying to cut the pay of the players, and I said if I was a player, I would not go for it. I also said that I would have threatened the owners with fisticuffs, and I still wholeheartedly believe that, but it doesn't seem like anybody's done that. Good for them. But yeah, no, just disrespecting me in that manner in which you're going to arguably take my salary from, I think it was Mike Trout's 36 or 37, something like that, down to like $6 million, something astronomically different. It would have been a problem if I was in that position. Luckily, I'm not, so I don't have to worry about that. But at least it sounds like the players, whether they listen to this podcast or not, decided to listen, take the advice that I would have given them, in theory. And the MLBPA is expected to counter the MLB's proposal with more games and full prorated salaries. So, the Major League Baseball Player Association, this is again ESPN, expects to counter MLB's economic proposal by the end of the week with a plan that includes more than 100 games, don't know how that's going to work, and a full guarantee of full prorated salaries for the 2020 season, sources familiar with the union discussions told ESPN. The good disagreement over economics has ratcheted up in the past few days after the league's first proposal Tuesday rankled players. On multiple phone calls Wednesday, players essentially pledged to ignore the league's proposal and instead offer one of their own, according to sources familiar with the calls. Washington Nationals ace Max Scherzer, one of the 8 players on the MLBPA's powerful executive subcommittee, tweeted Wednesday that the significant pay cuts in the league's proposal would not be accepted, and the union would remain committed to players receiving their full prorated salaries. After discussing the latest developments with the rest of the players, there is no need to engage with the MLBPA in any further compensation reductions. Scherzer wrote, Numbie's proposal, like I said, called for pay reductions on the top players' already prorated salaries, which was to be scaled to reflect the number of games the MLB played in an 82-game season. Guys like Mike Trout, who would be paid less than $6 million compared to the $19 million plus he would have received prorated. Although the pay cuts would be less severe for a large swath of lower paid players, the union's demands were clear and immediate. The union's desire to play more games could be used as a chip for negotiating to reach a return-to-play deal. For now, however, if the players are being paid on a prorated basis, more games will lead to larger salaries for the players. Makes sense. The league has balked at a longer schedule, fearful that a potential second wave of coronavirus could wipe out the postseason and the lucrative national TV money that comes with it. In a presentation to players, MLB said it would lose a significant amount of money if games are played in 2020. Would lose a significant amount of money if games are played in 2020. And they receive their full prorated salary. The union held firm that a March 17th agreement between the parties ensures the players their prorated share, while the league believes that language in the agreement calls for a good faith negotiation in the event the games are played in empty stadiums. Again, the union, remains... what happened? That was weird. But yeah, so basically the MLBPA did, again, what I suggest they do, and basically just hung up on them, which is, again, more power to them. I give them credit because a lot of player associations, i.e. the NFL, would not have held so firm on that. Obviously, when we see their latest CBA discussion, they talked obviously they got the 17th game in, or did they get no? I think they got the 17th game passed, but just not this year, but just eventually. And obviously you got the extra playoff teams, different things, different guarantees here and there. I know there was a lot of discussion, a lot of players didn't seem to be on the same page from the top all the way down in terms of the CBA negotiations, but at least it seems, well, again, we don't know, we haven't heard from every player, but it seems as if the players are pretty focused and pretty in lockstep when it comes to the pay, which is important because that's probably the biggest thing that's going to affect the players this season. Obviously, having a season is was the most important thing, but if there is a season, then how much they're going to get paid for the season, because they're obviously professionals and deserve to get money, is the biggest factor in my personal opinion. Just because in what they thought was an agreement, the MLB is now saying, it's an agreement, but we could still negotiate. And I'm just if we agree on something, there's nothing to negotiate. I mean, that's my understanding of agreements and how they work. If you and me both agree to something, and however we determine that this is agreed upon, whether it's a handshake or whatever different things, whether it's, in certain cases, it's a legitimate signed contract or whatever. If we make an agreement and then later you try to renegotiate the agreement we just made, why would I do that? That makes no sense. That's the whole entire point of having an agreement. You have an agreement so that you don't have to come back and negotiate later if something were to come up. And I understand they are trying to lower the money because the salary because there's no fans and stuff, so that'll affect the amount of money the players or the owners will get and the teams will get and stuff like that. But they knew that was probably going to be the case when they had these negotiations. Well, I don't want to say they knew that for certain because they agreed on this back at the end of March. So I don't know how serious people thought or were taking it at that time. But you have to at least think this was a possibility that there wouldn't be any fans when you agreed to this. There's no way you thought about it and then April hits and you're we might not have fans. We need to renegotiate. Why would you not have already thought of that before the agreement. Like, again, no one forced them to agree to that. Like, there was an agreement reached between the MLBPA and the owners. Like, I don't know what you want me from my MLBPA side to do. Like I said, we have an agreement. Just honor the agreement. That doesn't seem like a lot to ask. They're already taking less money, again, because of the number of games. And so, and then, like I said, and they're also just being like, hey, like, we're willing to play more games if you need us to. Obviously, they're basing it on a 81, 82 game season. And they're trying to be like, we'll play more if it comes to that. But then now they're like, oh, there might be a second wave. And I'm like, then why are we even playing? If you think that there might be a second wave that could affect things, then why are we even playing at all? Because that's the case whether you play 10 games or you play 100 games. There's still going to be a potential chance that, I mean, maybe not the second wave, wiping things out if there's 10 games, but there's a chance people could catch it. And there could be an outbreak within a team or within an organization, like, well, that's basically the same thing. But you understand my point, like, within like a locker room, all stuff like that, there's a possibility of that regardless of how many games you play. So if that's really made a concern, like, oh, there might be a second wave if we play too many games, then, like, why are we even playing the first amount of games? Because if we're playing 80 games, this is the chance that the second wave could hit during those games as well. Like, no one really knows how the second wave is, or how it's going to work, or when it's going to rear its head. Like, there's not like it's like, oh, it's definitely coming, and if you finish the season by this date, you'll be good. Like, no one knows that. So that seems like a weird negotiating tactic or weird negotiating point to be like, oh, there might be a second wave, so we can't play more games. Like, then why are we playing at all? I know why we're playing, but like, if that's a big hang up for you, then why are we even having games? Because if you were so worried about there being a second wave and the season has been shut down, then we shouldn't be playing the season. Like, if you think you're going to get shut down again, then why are you even starting? Because, like I said, or as I've discussed on this podcast, that's worse than just not starting up. It's starting up and then shutting down again. Because if you shut down, well, again, the MLB will only have to have shut down once. Well, no. Well, I guess because they never really got, like, started per se. Like, obviously they had, like, spring training and stuff, but they didn't, like, start the season. So it's not like they got shut down twice. I don't know. Because, like, the season hasn't, like, the regular season hasn't started. So I don't know how, what the semantics and all that stuff would be. But you get the point. Like, if you think there's a possibility you're going to have to shut down the league for whatever reason, then why are you having the season at all? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but hey, maybe I just don't see it. Continuing with the article, the union remains skeptical of the data the league shared that showed significant losses across the sport, and recently submitted additional document requests to the league in search of information about local television revenue, national television revenue, sponsorship revenue, and projections from the team. That's not good. If now they think the people are lying about the amount of money they're going to lose in order to try to save their behinds on the back end, that's not a good thing. I mean, I understand why, if you're the players in the Player Association, why you would, but I'm saying if you don't think that they're going to tell you the truth, then, like, it's hard to have a negotiation with them, in my opinion. If I can't trust you that you're not going to falsify the numbers in order to, like I said, to try to rationalize giving us less money, then I'm not exactly sure how I can trust you in anything regarding this. But maybe that's just me. We have previously negotiated a pay cut in the version of prorated salaries, and there's no justification to accept a second pay cut based upon the current information that the union has received, Scherzer wrote in his statement. I'm glad to hear other players voicing the same viewpoint and believe MLB's economic strategy could completely change if all documentation were to become public information. So yeah, they basically just think the owners are lying. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Like I said, rich guys like to stay rich, and they try to do that using loopholes or skirting things or being dishonest about things. So, would it shock me? No, but it's interesting that that's what the players think could potentially be happening as well. The fact that they're just like, yeah, no, we don't believe them. And we need them to have these records become public so that we know for a fact they're telling the truth. And also, lastly, the MLB has proposed no fans in games starting the first week in July, though the timeline could be pushed back if labor negotiations stretch out and preclude Spring Training 2.0 starting mid-June. So yeah, the And then, like I said, with all of these sports leagues, still a lot of things to be discussed. Even though the NHL, like we talked about with them in the last episode, they have their playoff plan in place, which is great. Still haven't really talked about the money. Still haven't really talked about the health and safety aspect of it. So there's a lot to be discussed. The NBA, obviously, other than it potentially being in Orlando, we don't have too much information about how all their stuff would work. And as we've discussed, the MLB is still trying to figure things out, especially on the pay side. So there's still a lot to be figured out, still a lot to be discussed, still a lot to be finalized before sports as we used to know them return, because even when they return, they're not going to be the sports that we grew up on and know and love. There'll be a version of it, because again, sports with no fans is going to be weird. I don't care what anybody says. It's going to be strange. But it is it's the best we can do at this point, so I mean, beggars can't be choosers, honestly. But yeah. So see how negotiations go with that. And like I said, it's hard to say what's going to happen with that, but I respect and I'm happy to see that the MLB players are holding firm for the time being. Again, we'll see if things change as we get into June or whatever, but I like to see that they're holding firm now, to be like, no, we're not going to go for this whatever you want to call that proposal the owners put together. They're not like, no, we're not going for that. So I respect them for that. And shout out to them. So hopefully it works. Hopefully they get what they want and obviously are not forced or backed into a corner by the owners and then forced to take a bad deal. But again, we'll see. And then as the news comes out, we'll be here to talk about it. So speaking of leagues giving us things to talk about, it seems as if the NBA is trying to do their best to make whatever version of the NBA they have that returns family friendly. So we'll talk about how they're trying to do that and what that means and all that fun stuff right after this break. So stay right there.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So, as the NBA begins to, like I said, ramp up its discussion, ramp up its proposals, guidelines, all that fun stuff for how and when they're going to return to play, eventually at some point this season, because it's going to happen. With that, they are trying to do their best to accommodate families down at Disney World, which is like kind of funny because like Disney World is obviously very family friendly. So I don't know if it's ironic or whatever the word would technically be, but I don't know. I just thought it was funny to me. But yeah, so apparently, again, it was all ESPN. The NBA and NBA Players Association are progressing on a plan that would allow for a limited number of family members to join the players for the season's resumption inside an Orlando, Florida bubble environment, sources told ESPN on Wednesday. Conversations have centered on the timing of family arrivals at Walt Disney World Resort. I said that weird, but still, which are likely to start once an initial wave of teams are eliminated and the number of people within the league's bubble decreases, sources said. Family members would be subjected to the same safety and coronavirus testing protocols as everyone else, living in the NBA's biosphere, sources said. Many players are eager to have families join them in Orlando, especially those on contending teams who anticipate lengthy stays in the playoffs. It is expected that teams would start to arrive in Orlando sometime mid-July, but those timetables are still under discussion, obviously, because nothing's really been finalized. Discussions were continuing Wednesday within the league, on how the NBA plans to structure a return-to-play scenario. The league has no current expectation that a decision on the finalized deal will emerge from Friday's afternoon call with the NBA's Board of Governors, sources said. The teams were also informed on Wednesday that players currently overseas will be granted clearance to re-enter the United States regardless of the U.S.'s travel restrictions. Interesting, did not know that. Existing in those countries, according to a memo obtained by ESPN. Travel restrictions have been in place during the coronavirus pandemic, obviously. And AMSO's going to have a call with general managers Thursday and the Board of Governors Friday, where officials are continuing to discuss variations of plans that include a play-in tournament, pool, play bracket, regular season games moving into the playoffs, basically anything is up in the air. The NBA just to formally rule out any idea, which is interesting, because some of these probably just won't work. But teams have become increasingly skeptical of the league bringing all 30 teams back to complete the season, which again makes sense. As we've discussed, at this point it makes sense to try to limit the amount of people that you have in the bubble, because then less people, in theory, less chances that the virus will come there and then also spread subsequently. So, and that was also, like I said, the less people that are there, the less people it can spread to. So that's also good, and then less people that can then pass it on to other people. So that makes sense that they wouldn't want to bring all 30 teams back. But with that, the Playoffs Plus idea that includes 20 and 24 teams has also been floated around. That would include more teams from the West and the East, which is interesting, mainly just because they're both trying to get Zion in the playoffs by any means necessary. Or just, I guess, not even necessarily, it doesn't have to be the playoffs, but just get more games out of Zion, because he didn't really play that many games in regular season. So they're trying to see whatever way they can find a way to get some revenue from while being able to have Zion play basketball and being able to watch Zion play basketball. So that's probably why the Playoff Plus idea came from. And they were still a ways back, I think, because they're further away than Portland. I think Portland's at the 9th seed, they're 3 or 3.5 or 2.5, something around that. Somewhere around the games back, so they're behind them, and they, like I said, they got some ground to make up. But like I said, the main thing is that it sounds like families will eventually be allowed in whatever sort of environment the NBA builds for their players and for their resumption of their league. And while I get it, still not certain it's the best idea, especially when you have kids. Now, again, generally speaking, from the different things that you hear or you can read or that are out there, kids, well, especially as long as they're not infants, kids who have some development of an immune system are probably going to be fine. Just again, most people are probably going to be fine from this virus, but with them, because they're not always the most cleanly, they seem like the type of people that would be carriers for the disease and then thus pass it along to their parents, who could then pass it along, at least their fathers, so they pass it along to their coaches and teammates, stuff like that. So I'm saying when you get down into that, as I can look at it from that perspective, it does get tricky trying to bring families in. Now, like I said, I get it, I understand it, but at the same time, it seems like it's going to be a little dicey to try to configure, just because, at least with the athletes, that they have a set schedule. They got to be at practice, they got to be at training, they got to be there's games, stuff like that. You can kind of monitor them more easily than you would be able to just a random family member, because again, when they're not, and I guess they probably wouldn't even, because they're not there's going to be fans, I don't think, so it's not like they're even going to the games. So I'm just what do they do during that time? Because I don't imagine, even if you coop them up in a really nice hotel room, kids are going to want to stay in a hotel room for the entirety of 2 months. It's not going to work. So I'm just like, where do you put them? And like, what do you do with them during the day? And how do you monitor them during the day? Because again, obviously most people care mainly about the athletes and the coaches and the training staff and the front office people and people working the broadcast and stuff like that. And like monitoring what they're doing, make sure they're not exposing themselves and potentially exposing others. But what do you do with the parents? I mean, the spouses and the kids potentially, or even some other family. Like, I don't know, maybe you're one of your parents lives with you, something like that. Like, what do you do with them, and then how do you monitor them? Because again, everyone's going to have all their attention focused on the athletes, understandably so. What do you do to make sure that they're okay, and how do you make sure that there's enough tests for them, and there's like the necessary steps and guidelines and restrictions and rules in place to make sure that they're also keeping things safe? Because I understand, generally speaking, I feel like the athletes are going to be on top of this just because they don't want to afford to be the reason why the league has to shut down again. That's just not really a good look, in my opinion. But like I said, they can't force their spouse to feel the same way. They can't force their kids to feel the same way. They can't monitor their kids or monitor their spouse or their girlfriend or whatever, or like I said, their parents potentially, or like a brother. Like, who knows what type of family members they would have down there. But you can't monitor all of them when you're out at practice, or you're like going to training, or you're watching film, or doing whatever at game, like playing in games. But like I said, what they do is just as important as what the athletes do, because again, if you're all going to be in the same place, then what you do and how you act affects everyone involved. It doesn't just affect your immediate family, it doesn't just affect your team, it affects the entire league, especially if they're all going to be confined into the same area, more or less. And obviously Disney has a lot of space, and they'll be able to spread people out and blah 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 and all that fun stuff, but again, how did you monitor that these people that aren't the athletes aren't doing anything dangerous that could potentially end up having the league shut down again? Like I said, at this point in time, it's just hard to see how you're going to be able to control them, personally. And now I do like the idea of having them come like later on in the playoffs when, again, more teams are out, so less people to be in contact with, in theory. But at the same time, it's just hard to imagine you're going to be able to police all these people and like test all these people and all that stuff, and like I said, make sure everybody can stay safe if the more people you have. But also on the flip side, I don't understand why, if I'm an athlete, I wouldn't want to be down there without family. Because again, just to be down there cooped up in a hotel room or whatever, they kind of keep them alone for 2-3 months, however long season is, depending on if you're a team that makes it to the finals or not, would definitely be lonely. So I would understand why players and that could kind of maybe affect the player's focus and thus their ability to perform in the game. So I don't understand why you don't want to run into that scenario either. But like I said, I don't know what good scenario there is for this, because you want to try to limit the amount of people, but you also want to try to make it so the players have the necessary system around them in order to be supported, in order to be able to perform at the highest level. So that means having their families. But then also, like I said, you can't police the families the same way, because they're not going to be on a strict schedule where they're going to be a certain place at a certain time, and you know that, and you can monitor them and track them and follow them and do all those other things. Like, if they're just going to be out and about and on the Disney World, I mean the world, like the Wild World of Sports campus. And like I said, like maybe they could enforce guidelines about wearing masks and doing another thing, but as we've seen around the country, not everybody believes in that. So how do you enforce that? Or what do you do to enforce that? Like I said, it's just the more people you bring in, the trickier it gets, in my opinion. Though, like I said, I get it and I appreciate them thinking about the families. Again, the more people, like I said, the more people we try to bring in, the harder it gets to contain, in theory. So we don't know how bad it'll be. And then, like I said, the trickier it gets to be able to test people and monitor people and track people and all that. Something you're going to need to do in order to make sure that you don't have a scenario where your season ends up getting stopped again midway through the playoffs. Because obviously that's what no one wants. But yeah, so it'd be interesting to see. And again, this isn't necessarily official, but it's just something that they talked about. And I just thought it'd be interesting to try to ponder how they're going to do it. And I'm not exactly sure how you do it safely. Because again, when the players are out, who do you have monitoring the families? That would just be my question. And again, if you think you know it and you think you understand it, maybe I'm just missing something that's clear and obvious to everybody else, just feel free to reach out to us and let us know, or ask us why I didn't see this or why I didn't see that. I'm more than willing to talk about it. But just like I said, from my perspective at this moment, it seems like, again, the more people we bring in, the harder it would be to contain. And yeah, so that's just my thoughts on that. After this next break, we're going to come back and we're going to discuss my thoughts on arguably, because I'm like Tom Brady, but arguably one of the bigger names in free agency is still out there, and he's apparently turned down a deal with a potential new team. So we'll talk about the player, talk about the maybe some of the parameters of the deal. I don't know how much is out there. We'll talk about that, talk about what that could mean, talk about where he may end up, because again, it's already about to be June, and the brother still hasn't been signed. So we'll discuss all that right after this break. Stay right there.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Here again on the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by the GSMC Podcast Network. So, apparently, according to reports, Jadeveon Clowney turned down what would have been a very big or lucrative offer from the Browns. Not exactly sure why. We will get into that in just a moment. This is from Pro Football Talk, but again, there's a bunch of different articles about this, so you can read up from whatever site you choose to get your football news from. Apparently, Jadeveon Clowney did not want to be in Cleveland. The Browns made an aggressive offer, to Clowney, who balked at going to Cleveland. Adam Schefter it said today on ESPN Radio in Cleveland. According to Schefter, the offer the Browns made was clearly the best Clowney has received, but he didn't bite. Browns general manager Andrew Berry said last month that Clowney is a good player, and he's always looking to add good players. But otherwise, the Browns haven't said anything, about the level of interest. The problem, however, appears to be Clowney's level of interest. He's recovering from surgery on a core muscle and may not have many suitors right now, but he appears content to wait to see if something else comes along, someone more appealing than the Browns, which, in my opinion, is very interesting. So, again, I went to a different article from CBS Sports, and this is, again, just to give you a little bit more background into what Schefter said. Schefter said, again, on ESPN Radio in Cleveland, that I think they've been the most aggressive team within financially, Schefter said, of the Browns per ESPN's Jack Trotter, and I just think he balked at going to Cleveland for whatever reason. I think he's been hesitant to go, because if he wasn't, he would have gone already, because it's the most money. It's the richest offer on the table, and he hasn't taken it. Schefter also added that he was unsure why Clowney would be hesitant to take Browns' offer, and now Clowney could still opt to sign there, but he's added that there's no doubt that Cleveland has offered him the biggest deal. And apparently also the Browns are targeting ex-Minnesota Viking Everson Griffin as well, trying to find a way to bolster their pass rush. And also, supposedly, I mean, as we discussed for a while ago, that Tennessee was potentially an option. Obviously, he was traded from Houston for trying to get a big term contract, and it did not really working out. So Tennessee was an option. Seattle, I guess, is technically still an option. Cleveland is very clearly an option, as if the reports are true. They've offered him the most amount of money, but he just, for whatever reason, is unwilling to take it. And obviously, only he will be able to answer that. But for whatever reason, he decided, like, nah, that's not it. I need to teach his own. I know the Eagles supposedly at one point were interested, and one team, don't know if it's the Eagles or if it's a different team. Oh, well, obviously it's not the Browns. Hasn't valued him at much more than $10 million a year. And apparently, okay, so like the Eagles apparently were a team that reportedly took him off of their wish list because of Clowney's desired salary. So, I think this brings us to a more interesting discussion of players overvaluing themselves. Because if anything is clear, it is that whatever number Clowney has for himself, where he believes that he should get, other teams in the league and the market does not believe that number. Don't know why, not exactly sure. But somewhere there's a disconnect. And I don't think he's alone in that. Obviously, as we've seen with the Dak Prescott negotiations, their numbers are way off. I mean, not, I don't want to say way off, but they've discussed the length is off and maybe some of the numbers off. It's hard to say with these negotiations. You don't really know. When you see stuff leaked to me, you don't know what's true and what's false. What's just being used as a negotiation tactic to drive up the price or drive down the price, respectively. But yeah, so for whatever reason, it seems as if the situation with Clowney is going worse than he would have expected. And why? I'm not sure. Because, again, Cleveland wasn't a great team last year. But they're not a bad team. They got good pieces, and assuming Myles Garrett doesn't do anything again, so suspended again, you'll be paired with him on the outside. Now, they didn't really help the Browns much this past season. I think Olivier Vernon was the guy this past year, and that didn't really do a whole lot for him in terms of his sack numbers. But Clowney's a better pass rusher than him and a better run defender. So, to be opposite Myles Garrett means, in theory, a lot of one-on-one chances, and with that, Clowney should be able to have a good season. But for whatever reason, he decided not to go there. And I'm just curious, because if it is about the money, which at least it seems to be to a degree, because again, he hasn't signed anywhere, then why not take a place that gives you the most amount of money? Because that's what a lot of guys do in free agency. It doesn't always have to be the best team. It doesn't always have to be the best situation. But you're only a free agent maybe you're like at once, maybe twice, depending on how good you are in your career, where you have like complete anonymity over your situation, or I don't know if that's the right word, but you guys get what I'm saying. Complete control. That's a better word. Complete control over your situation. You can say where you go, where you want to go, where you don't want to go, how much money, to a degree, how much money you do and don't want to make. Like, again, so I understand why people don't take the free agent decision lightly, because, again, this may not happen again for Clowney. We really don't know. Or at least may not have another chance to make, like, big money. Like, he may have another, after this deal's up in 3, 4, 5, how many every years, he may hit the open market again and have a chance to sign some money, but it's not going to be for as much as he could potentially get now. So I understand him holding out for his money to a degree. But again, if money is a big factor, then you would think, all right, just go to where the most money is. You saw that with Byron Jones. Not to say Miami is a bad situation, but going from a team in the Cowboys that was competing for the playoffs almost every year he was there, basically, to now going to the Dolphins, who were in the midst of a rebuild. Obviously, the large salary, I should say, and the no state tax potentially were key factors. But I'm just saying, there's like on paper, is like does going to Miami make the most sense? You could argue maybe not. And I'm saying you see that in free agency all the time. You see that with receivers. See, especially with corners. Corners always get big money. I know Jermaine Johnson got like a big contract years ago. Left the Rams to go to the Jets. that obviously hasn't worked out very well for him. Happens, obviously, the Eagles have had their fair share of free agent mishaps at the corner position. See, a lot of, like I said, a lot of players go for the money. And, like I said, to a degree, it seems to be what Clowney's doing. But at the same time, if that was the case, then what's the holdup with going to Cleveland? That's where I'm just a little confused. Again, this is assuming this is true. This may not be true. This may have been leaked by the Browns or by his camp to try to get him more suitors. That there's a big deal out there from the Browns, even though because in neither of the two articles that I read did it say a number amount, so we don't know how big is, because big may be relative to the other pass rushers on the market, big may be relative to what he's made of, right? Like, we don't really know what a big offer is, a lucrative offer is. Like I said, at the end of the day, we just know that supposedly it was the most money out there. And like I said, if it is about the money, you think Cleveland makes sense, but if it's not about the money, then this could drag on for a while, which is like how, I understand COVID's happening, so it's not like anyone's out there really working out on the field, though states are beginning to say that teams can open up their practice facilities and stuff, so training camp seems to be, at least for the time being, to be a go. And like I said, if that's the case, then it's just curious that we're now in June and a pass rusher in his prime, or potentially about to reach June in a couple of days, and a pass rusher in his prime is still on the open market. Because that just doesn't happen. That's not a thing that happens. Obviously, maybe some older pass rushers, some vet running backs, maybe a receiver, vet quarterback, 2 here or there. Those guys may be still on the open market come June, July, before training camp starts up. And obviously, they may get signed like a camp body or something. But like I said, pass rushers in their prime, even though again is Clowney the most isn't a big like sack guy, he's still a very productive pass rusher, very productive run defender, and he's only like 27 years old, something around there. And just like available on the open market, like it's been like 2-3 months and just no one wants him, and that's just like that to me is a little weird for whatever reason. Again, it's probably on him, maybe it's on the teams, I don't know, but that something's amiss there to me, and I'm not sure exactly when it's going to get situated, because like I said, with the COVID situation, it's like there's no real, maybe that's the reason why he's willing to wait it out, because like I said, you're not missing anything on the field. If you go to a new team, obviously you're missing time getting to know your teammates in meeting rooms or whatever, getting to get into the playbook, stuff like that, but on the field there's nothing going on. So I do wonder if that hadn't happened, and obviously we'll never know because COVID had started by the time free agency started, so we won't know how much different that would be. But maybe in December and January, when people weren't really thinking about the coronavirus coming here, maybe it wasn't a thought, like it probably wasn't a thought to him that like, I could potentially be in June and not have signed with anybody. But now, like I said, once you hit like April and you saw the offers weren't coming in, and you know nobody's really going to be practicing, it's like, maybe I can wait this out, because like, what's the rush? You're not getting on the field till July, like late July at best. Like, it's like there isn't really a hold up or a rush to get into a team's facility because they can't get into the facility. So I don't know what's up with that. It's just weird to me that a guy like Clowney, who, while again the sack numbers aren't great, is a relatively productive player and is still only 27 years old and is just available on the open market in July, on top of the fact that he's turning down potentially big deals, because we don't know what the number is, but according to Schefter, he's turning down big deals now in June, and I'm just like, what is he waiting for? Because again, from the teams that he has available, in theory, I guess he has Seattle. That's a tough division. At least he knows it, but tough division. Tennessee, he made the playoffs last year, but will the Tannehill experiment work a second year? It probably could, but we don't know that for a fact. And then Cleveland, at least in Cleveland, you have a bona fide bookend pass rusher on the opposite side of you. Now, it's Cleveland. Not everybody likes Cleveland. I've never been. I heard decent things. But yeah, maybe he doesn't want to go to Cleveland. which I get, but if that's the case, then why even entertain them? Because, again, when you're free, you have the ability to be like, I'm not going there, I'm not signing there, you don't give me an offer. But he's willing to entertain that, so at least he's, in his head, he's like, okay with going to Cleveland, to a degree, and he's just like, no. Like, now, and I'm just like, where else where are you hoping somebody's going to give you money for? Because as long as this waits, now the team's going to be like, you know what, you were right, we'll give you that $20 million US. Like, no, why would they do that now? Because they know no one else is going to. Because if they were, they would have done it already, because you would have been signed somewhere. So, it's just weird. This continues to get weird. I'm not really sure why he turned on the Cleveland deal, but he did. Hey, to each his own. See how it works out for Clowney. And whenever he does sign somewhere, we'll talk about it. But, I mean, Clowney and Garrett, rush and passer on the same line or same unit. Sounds like a good unit to me, so I don't know from a football standpoint why Clowney wouldn't want it. But, hey, I guess that maybe he doesn't want to go to Cleveland. Who knows? But next, obviously we got to discuss this. There's been a lot happening in the world and I guess not this past couple of days, not just the past couple of weeks, past couple of months, past few years in terms of situations happening with African Americans, unarmed African Americans being killed by whether it's their white counterparts or by the police or whoever. And with that, we have seen a lot of players speak up, but we also have seen some not speak up. And I'm going to discuss whether I believe it is right to expect players to speak up about these things openly on social media or TV, interviews, whatever platforms they want to use. So we'll discuss that and my opinions on that right after this break. So stay right there.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
GSMC Podcast Network. So, social issues in sports. It's a tough topic. It's a hot button topic. Obviously, with also what happened with Kaep and the kneeling, people are not exactly thrilled when players mix politics and sports. Though obviously the president had comments about that, and he's legitimately the biggest politician in the country. So it's hard to not say mixing politics and sports. They play the national anthem before every game. That's to a degree mixing politics and sports. Well, I mean, I hate that argument, but whatever. So I mean, and it's not just the Kaep stuff, but obviously that was not going to say the most recent, but one of the bigger things in terms of social issues and players using their platform or not using their platform to speak out against it or for it or whatever. Whatever your opinions are, everybody had an opinion on that, and most people have opinions on most things, whether they said it publicly or not. But in light of recent events that have happened this week, in which you had another unarmed black man by the name of George Floyd. I just want to make sure I said that. I'm pretty George Floyd was killed when a police officer held his knee on his neck for a long period of time. I didn't watch the video. If you did, more power to you. I just don't like watching people get killed on video, though I'm watching The Wire. So whether or not you want to call me of whether or not you want to call that contradictory, by all means. But it's, I know The Wire isn't real. Obviously, it's depicting a real city, but it's not like people aren't dying in real life. So I just don't like watching any of those type of videos. It doesn't matter who it is, race, gender, it doesn't matter. I don't like watching those videos. But obviously it happened, and that has led to an outpouring of thoughts behind what happened, an outpouring of protests in Minnesota and Minneapolis, because if you didn't know, the murder of Philando Castilla a couple years ago, 2017 I believe, also was in Minnesota. So I think these people, and plus on top of the fact that people have been in quarantine, staying at home for months on end, probably a lot of pent up anger, and rightfully so. They saw a situation where an unarmed black man was killed on camera, and the person was cleared of the charges. So, and I mean, we don't know the future yet, but the playbook generally is pretty similar when it's a lot of these things. Now, not every situation is the same. Not every situation is white on black. Sometimes it's different races on. Sometimes roles are reversed. Sometimes roles are intermixed. Like it's not exactly black and white, as you would say. But generally, when it does happen in the way it happened with Philando Castilla or George Floyd or a litany of other names, generally what happens is they get not to turn this whole thing into a race thing. I'll get to the sports aspect of it in a second. The video gets put out, or maybe there isn't a video at first. Then eventually the video comes out, and then people are outraged. They call for the person's job. The person may get fired or get put on administrative leave, depending on the police department. They may get charged. They may not get charged. That's even just people getting charged is sometimes a big step, which is as unfortunate as it can be, that the fact that killing people on camera is now not automatically deemed a crime. Sometimes they get charged, and then even if they do get charged, they're not always convicted. And then that happens, more outrage, and then like everyone just forgets. Well, not everybody, because people do remember, and I think that's part of the reason why Minneapolis is reacting the way that it is, because they do remember it happening. But yeah, so that's a lot of the playbook and how it normally goes. And obviously people are afraid that's going to happen again in this case when there's a legitimate video of a guy taking another human being's last breaths. But with that, you've seen a lot of players tweet things, post things on Instagram, like the typical guy. I don't say typical, but like the guys that normally speak out. You got LeBrons, you got the Kaepernicks, you got Odells, and different people along those lines that are all tweeting things and saying things. You got people that Michael Porter Jr. that are saying things contrary to that, and then obviously they're getting a whole lot of other separate backlash, and that's not necessarily my point. But one of the bigger, I don't say one of the bigger names, but one of the bigger things from Thursday night specifically was when Carson Wentz tweeted out a notes app on his comments and his thoughts on what is going on, not only just in Minnesota but in the world as a whole, and talking about how it's not right, and how even though he doesn't understand, and he'll never understand, and doesn't understand, like he empathizes with them, and he wants to be able to understand, and wants to be able to help and things like that. The borderline. Now, it makes sense. He was in a locker room with Malcolm Jenkins and Chris Long and Torrey Smith, guys that have been outspoken on these kind of things before, so it's hard not to rub off on him to a degree, even though, again, like he pointed out, he's from North Dakota. He hasn't experienced the things and hasn't had needed to feel the same way that most African Americans do feel when they're confronted by the police. That just got a little bit of notoriety because obviously he's a white male, and obviously he got praise, he got adulation for doing that. But my thing is, and also his teammate Zach Ertz put out a similar, separate comment, but like similar line of thinking. But those two things got me thinking of, should we expect players to speak on these type of things? And I say both yes and no. And like I said, that's regardless of what your opinions on it, because obviously not everybody's going to agree on everything. As I said, there were people that were saying like, oh, we should pray for the cop and what he's going through and other things, and like we didn't see the whole video, we didn't see the lead up, blah blah blah. And it's the same thing that happens every time these kind of things happen. I'm not just saying if you're on the side of, or on the right side of things, I believe, on the person that got murdered and how the person that did the murdering should be convicted and sent to jail. Not just fired from their job, quote unquote. And everyone that helped them, obviously, because the 4 officers got fired. All the other people that were there that didn't stop it should also be charged with something. But just like I said, or should it be a requirement for players and athletes to speak out? Like I said, yes and no. Because I say yes, first off, because it is important, especially for prominent white athletes, to speak out. Because obviously, with African American athletes, it seems like regular. I mean, it's not that it's regular, but you expect it from them. You expect them. They're gonna speak out. They're gonna feel. They're gonna have a natural connection to it because of the color of their skin. So that makes sense. So when they speak out, it's not necessarily surprising. No, we'll get to why I don't think they need to speak out. To necessarily, like I said, it's yes and no. It's a weird conundrum to be in. But yes, like I said, they should, because they have a platform. They can reach more people than the average person, you or me, somebody listening to this can. They have a platform. They have a position to where they can talk to a mass group of people and explain to them why this isn't okay and why it shouldn't be happening, even though it should be obvious. But again, not everybody grows up in that environment, sees the types of things, understands the feelings that black people have in this country whenever confronted by police based on what has happened to them throughout the history of their time in this country. So like I said, that your platform allows that. And then, like I said, it says less black athletes, but then white athletes specifically, because they have the power to influence people like them, in terms of people that, like I said, they didn't grow up around a whole lot of black people. They didn't grow up in areas or towns or cities to where it was very mixed. They spent a lot of time just around white people, interacted a lot with white cops, stuff like that. So they don't understand why an African American person would feel that way towards a cop or feel that way towards another white person in terms of their disdain for them potentially. I'm not say every black person hates white people, but again, based on the events, it would at least be mildly justified. So they have a position to influence those people and get the platform out and get those people to listen. Because again, when an African American athlete speaks out about this, it's just like, it's expected. It may not be taken. I'm not gonna say it's not gonna be taken as serious, but again, it's not a surprise. Everyone expect it to happen. You're more surprised if an African American athlete doesn't speak out in that manner. But when you get it from a prominent white athlete, it doesn't matter who it is. It can obviously potentially have more of an impact because they have, as a white male, more power and more influence in this country to make changes. Not, again, speaking out is one thing, but in order to make changes, add and put in reforms, things like that, they have more control over the country, so they can not only influence more people to understand why their black counterparts feel this way, but also then allow that influence to turn into change. Where again, black people have been trying this for years. Clearly hasn't worked out in our favor. But again, the white athletes can potentially influence that change. But at the same time, it's like, I, as a person, do not go to my athletes to see their social stances just because I have my own stance. Whenever these type of things happen, doesn't not just this, but any sort of social issue, quote unquote, happens, I view it, I see it, and I have whatever feelings I have, regardless of what other people have. Again, not to say that you all have to agree with me or anybody will always agree with everything I think or feel on certain topics. But I don't go to my athletes to know or to see what they think or see if that I wonder if they think the same thing as me, or I wonder if they think of it like this, or maybe they're going to tell me something that I didn't really think about, which is a possibility, but that's not, I don't go to my athletes for that. That's not something, I go through the same thing with celebrities. I don't go to them being I wonder what such and such thinks about this, or I wonder what such and such has to say. That doesn't really affect me, personally. Because they're often different than my life, their upbringing is different than my upbringing, their line of thinking and their mindset may potentially be different than my line of thinking and my mindset. So I don't need to know what they think to know what I think. And I feel like that's the issue with a lot of people is they not, I'm going to say everybody, but some people can be influenced to that degree in terms of they look towards other people to see kind of what the popular opinion or what their opinion could potentially be. Again, not to say that people just copy the opinions of their favorite athletes, but I think they can be swayed more by it. Like, oh, okay, this person said that thing, I didn't really think about that. And again, it's perfectly fine to change your opinion. But, like, you may say something and you see such and such says something different, and you're like, oh, okay, maybe I'm right. Or you say something, you see such and such says something different, you're like, oh, maybe I'm wrong. Kind of thing. And again, not that I'm steadfast on all my opinions. I am flexible to a degree in order I'm willing to change stances on some things. But at the same time, I formulate my own opinions for myself, so I don't need to go to my athletes to see what they say to understand and to understand where their head's at in terms of this. Because, like I said, it doesn't affect me in my life, per se. Like, whatever they feel, whatever they think, whatever they've been through does not change what I think, what I feel, what I'm going through, or have been through. So I don't need their, whether it's justification or their understanding. While it's appreciated, definitely that's what I'm saying. It's nice for them to speak out. It's not something that I think should be required of athletes if they don't want to. Now, again, I'm not saying that they should be shunned from doing it. Obviously, like I said, when with the Kaepernick whole peaceful protest thing, people were like, acting like, oh, this isn't the right time, this isn't the right place, blah, blah, whatever. Like, that's wrong. If they want to do it, they can do it. I'm just saying, I am not viewing it as a requirement of you as an athlete that you need to speak on all social issues like black, white, indifferent. Like, in regards of your opinion, whether it's right, whether I think it's right, whether I think it's wrong, you have to speak out about something. You need to say something. Every time something happens, you need to say something. You need to tweet something. You need to post something on Instagram. You need to repost something. You need to retweet something. Like, that's not a thing that I think is necessary. If you have thoughts and opinions and feelings, by all means, put them out. But I don't think we should be like, oh, such and such didn't say something, or oh, such and such didn't say something, or why hasn't this person tweeted about it, or why hasn't that person tweeted about it? Like, I'm just saying, like, it shouldn't be a requirement as an athlete that you have to speak on literally everything that happens in the country. I don't think. Now, again, people are going to feel differently about that. Like I said, I do appreciate when athletes, black, white, and other, speak out on social issues that are plaguing our country, because, again, at least it shows their more human side, because, again, these things, they can't happen to celebrities, because as Kanye West pointed out a long time ago, even if you're in the Benz, you were still a bleep in a coupe. You can film for yourself what that bleep is. But yeah, basically just saying it doesn't matter how successful you are, you're still black. Like, people will just still see you as black at the end of the day. And that's completely true. So like I said, I appreciate athletes willing to speak out, because again, it shows that they still have some sort of connection to the regular folk down here that are going through these things. So obviously you don't see these same things happen to athletes to this degree. Not to say that it can't happen, because obviously, I think it was LeBron's house in Cali a couple years ago had the N-word and stuff spread all over it. So again, not that it can't happen, but it doesn't happen to the same degree. Well, like I said, I appreciate them speaking out, because it shows that, again, they're still in touch, they're still in tune, they're still paying attention to what's happening to the regular people. But like I said, it's not something that I require out of my athletes or my celebrities, or I think should be required. Because then if that's just not you, you're not an outspoken like that person, that's just not something you do. You shouldn't be forced to do something, you shouldn't be forced into a role that's not you. But at the same time, if you are willing to speak out and you are outspoken, I give you more power to do that. Again, this country, in theory, is about freedoms and choices. So if you have a choice whether you want to speak out or you don't want to speak out. You have the freedom to speak out or not speak out. That's more power to you. You can choose whatever you want to do. But like I said, I just don't think it's necessarily necessary to force people to do that. So it's like I said, it's a weird concept on should players speak out, or do they have to speak out, or should they be forced to speak out, or do they have to do interviews, do they have to answer questions, blah, blah, blah. Like I said, it's a weird conundrum, because while it's definitely great for people to speak out and use their platform to educate others and push for change and push for reforms and get things done in the country, because obviously they have the position and power to do that kind of thing. At the same time, if a player doesn't speak out, I'm not looking at them differently, because they don't. That's just, again, you can't force something onto someone. If that's not you, that's not you. So, again, that's just my 2 cents on that. I figured, like I said, I had to find a way to, it was in the show at some point because there's too much going on, from the actual murder to the protests that have happened to the riots and all that stuff to not talk about. It's arguably the biggest story in the country. I'm not saying in the world, in the country at the moment. It's honestly bigger than the coronavirus. If you haven't heard people talk about the coronavirus in a couple of days, because that's all that's been taking up people's, at least on Twitter and Instagram, it's all that's been taking up people's timelines. Is this murder, and obviously murders that happened before that. But yeah, like I said, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate it keeps happening. It's unfortunate that we still live in a world where this can happen, and the people are probably going to get off, because that's just what happens. And even if they don't, which is what should happen, they should be charged with murder. That doesn't mean the next person won't get off. That's the situation we're at, where we're just like, we have to hope with every new case, and it should be a foregone conclusion, but it's not. Like I said, it's messed up. But again, shout out to athletes, black, white, and other. But obviously, the white athletes that don't have any personal connection to us, obviously because of the color of their skin or whatever. But are you willing to use their platform to empathize and try to understand what African Americans go through and try to figure out the ways they can impact the world in order to make it a safer place, in theory. So shout out to them. But yeah, I don't think it's weird, because it's cool, but it's, like I said, not necessary. But if you do it, great. So speaking of players being outspoken, DeAndre Hopkins made some interesting comments recently about other receivers in the league and his standing at the receiver position, and it got me thinking on the top 5 receivers in the league heading into next season. So I will first discuss his comments, then I'll discuss my opinion on the top 5 receivers heading into the next season. So, like I said, we'll talk about all that right after a break. Stay right there.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA, from the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and One Championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
So, as I mentioned, DeAndre Hopkins has an interesting comments to say on ESPN's Jalen Jacoby show about where he thinks his standing is at the receiver position. He said, and I quote, I'm definitely think I'm the best. I mean, he should say that, but he said that on Thursday on the Jalen and Jacoby show. I know I'm the best. My boy, Mike's my boy. I love Saints receiver Michael Thomas, but he knows if I had Drew Brees my whole career, what these numbers would look like. Julio Jones knows if I had Matt Ryan my whole career. That's my boy. I trained with Julio too. He knows what these numbers would be. Those guys are definitely blessed to be in a position where their whole career they had a Pro Bowl quarterback that they spent multiple seasons with. But I don't complain. I don't make excuses. I just go out there and work. Hopkins has caught passes from 10 different quarterbacks since he joined the Texans in 2013, with only Deshaun Watson really being the most stable, obviously being with him for 3 seasons, and even the first season was only like 6-7 games or whatever before Watson tore his ACL, so it wasn't even that much. With Watson at the quarterback, Hopkins has caught 268 passes for almost 3,400 yards and 25 touchdowns in 38 games. And overall, he has the 3rd most receiving yards since 2017 behind Jones and Michael Thomas. So, like I said, and obviously he's excited about playing with Kyler, which is something he was discussing. But it got me thinking. Well, first off, it got me thinking, obviously, about like the top 5 receivers heading into next season, but also got me thinking about some of the quarterbacks he's played with. And when you go through his seasons, especially if you look at some of his Pro Bowl seasons, and you look at the quarterbacks he had, ooh, buddy, not great. So, this is 2015. His first Pro Bowl season. He had Brian Hoyer for 9 games, Ryan Mallett for 4 games, TJ Yates for 2 games, and Werner Reed for 1. None of those people would necessarily call excellent quarterbacks. But that's what he had. And that season, even with all that, he played 16 games, put up 111 catches, 1,500 yards, and 11 touchdowns. In 2014, he had 76 catches for 1,210 yards and 6 touchdowns, and did all that while catching passes from Ryan Fitzpatrick, Case Keenum for 2 games, and Ryan Mallett for 2 games. So again, not exactly Pro Bowl, All-Pro caliber quarterbacks. And it's no coincidence that his 3 All-Pro seasons have all come while he's had Deshaun Watson at quarterback. And even, like I said, 2017, you only had Deshaun for 7 games, I believe. He had 6 games. I forgot, I think they started Tom Savage 1 game. Like the first game or something. It was something weird like that. So you only had him for 6 games, had Tom Savage for 7 and TJ Yates for 3. And still put up 96 receptions, 1378, and 13 touchdowns. Again, all while having Deshaun Watson for only 6 games. So I understand his point. If I were him, I'd feel the same way. If I was him and I had Deshaun Watson instead of having him for the past 3 seasons and basically 2.5 seasons, if I had him for, he's been in the league 7 years. Even if he had him for 5 of those 7, his numbers could potentially look even crazier. And like I said before that, he had a season of 1,200 yards and 1,500 yards and double-digit touchdowns before he got with Deshaun. And obviously, its numbers have continued to go up since then outside of this past season where it wasn't even that bad, but just a little bit down compared to his normal self. And even he was a little bit banged up and other things. But yeah, so if I'm DeAndre Hopkins, I feel the exact same way. And I'm like, look, you guys are lucky my quarterback situation has been so shaky for most of my career. Because if it hadn't, my numbers would look just like yours. Like I said, and obviously receivers is a very confident position, so I understand why he would say that. But, like I said, it got me thinking on heading into the 2020 COVID season, who I would have as my top 5 receivers. Now, the top 3, in my opinion, are pretty simple. It should be Michael Thomas, DeAndre Hopkins, and Julio Jones in some order. Then 4 and 5 is where things start to get a little bit more tricky. This is, again, there's a lot more guys you can put in there. But I'll work my way up from 5, and then we'll get up to 1. So 5, I think, even though this is definitely going to be a one's high debatable, because you got guys like Keenan Allen. You got guys like Devontae Adams, who missed some time last year. And that's why his numbers may be a little bit down. You got guys like Kenny Galladay, who had a great year with Matt Stafford missing a lot of time. You have guys like Amari Cooper or DJ Moore who put up good seasons. Adam Robinson put up a good season even though his quarterback play was very shaky. Cortland Sutton on the come up. Michael Gallup on the come up. Stephon Diggs, seeing what he does with his new team. There's a lot of options out there. But my number 5 probably has to be Tyreek Hill. And I say that only because, and not only because, but mainly because he's going to have, in my opinion, unquestionably the best quarterback out of all these receivers. Patrick Mahomes, in my opinion, the best quarterback in the league, arguably the best player in the league. And with that on your side, it's going to be hard to not put up good numbers if he's healthy. Obviously, last season he had the injury situation, so his numbers were a little bit down. But like I said, in 12 games, he still put up over 800 yards, 7 touchdowns on under 60 catches. And the year before that, when he was fully healthy, he put up 87 receptions for almost 1,500 yards and 12 touchdowns in Mahomes' first year as a starter, with the first year for them together, and then the year before that when he started Alex Smith, he put up 75 for 11, 83, and 7. And like obviously people would view him as a speed guy, but he's obviously a speed guy. He's a guy that he still runs good routes, short and intermediate. He's a guy that's not afraid to go up and get a ball for a guy that's only 5'10", 5'11". Like he's not afraid to go up and try to jump up and get a ball, not just letting everything come down to him. He's willing to, like I said, play above the rim, as people like to say. So, like I said, this is probably a controversial one, but I mean, also, I didn't mention him, but Odell, a guy who's been a top 5 receiver in the league before, but again, coming off of the past season, and again, not knowing how Baker's going to play, is a little hard to determine. Even though, like I said, he didn't have a terrible season, as we talked about with the bounce back guys, but like I said, he's going to have to prove himself to be that caliber of guy again before he'll be cemented in top 5. Obviously, he's top 5 talent-wise, you could argue, but in terms of who I think is going to be a top 5 receiver next year, again, it's hard to bet against Tyreek Hill, but then that was the one I'm a little bit shaky about, just because you could debate 7 guys, or it could be in that top 5, and you wouldn't be that wrong on any of them. So number 4 is kind of cheating, but it's my list, so I can cheat if I want. And I'm going to put it as a tie between Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, just because I don't know who the number 1 receiver is going to be with Tom Brady there now. Like, obviously, we knew with Jameis, he liked throwing to Mike Evans, but again, he had a great season with Chris Godwin. So if he was coming back, I might be more lean more towards Chris Godwin, who had the 3rd most receiving yards in the league last year with 1333, had 86 catches, 9 touchdowns, which was more in every statistic than Mike Evans. Even though Mike Evans had a higher yard per catch with 17.3 to Godwin's 15.5. So, like I said, they're a tie, so whoever's the number 1 there, I think, could potentially be a top 5 receiver. I mean, Mike Evans has been a top 5 receiver in the league, has had great seasons. Even with Jameis and others at quarterback. Has never had a season under 1,000 yards, which is crazy for not just him, but for anybody. The year before Chris Godwin has a breakout, he had a career year, over 1,500 yards, 86 catches, 8 touchdowns. Obviously, not the double-digit touchdowns that he used to having early in his career, but still a great season. And like I said, now you have Chris Godwin, who's continuing to track upwards. I thought he was going to be potentially a breakout guy last year, but not to this degree where he catches 1,300, catches almost 90 balls, 1,300 yards, and 9 touchdowns. I did not think he was going to be that good this soon, but here we are. So, like I said, those guys, depending on who Brady is working with, and even, like I said, even with that, and even with Jameis throwing 30 interceptions, both these guys put up arguably wide receiver 1 numbers. Like if either of those numbers were put up by your top receiver, you're like, all right, we have one of the best receivers in the league. And like I said, they had 2 of them, both within the top 15 in yards. And obviously in yards on everything, but they're both in the top 15 in yards, and we're both in the top. Or I guess there was a lot of guys tied in terms of touchdowns, but both in the top 25 of touchdowns. And Godwin was tied for 4th. With only 3, like I said, with only 3 guys ahead of him in terms of total touchdowns this past season. Though the touchdowns were down from receivers' perspective, in my opinion, this past year. But yeah, so like I said, those 2 will go there. And then, like I said, this is where it gets interesting. Because number 1, I think, should be a clear cut based on last season, but 2 and 3 is where the debate is. Just because you have one guy who's with a new quarterback, but has put up numbers with literally every quarterback he's played with. Then you have another guy who even, like, his team's coming off a down year, even though he himself wasn't that bad, but also he's just a guy that doesn't catch a lot of touchdowns. Now, obviously, the second guy is I'm talking about Julio Jones, who's had 1 double-digit touchdown catch season in his career, which is crazy for the Hall of Fame caliber career he's put together for himself. 2-time All-Pro, 7-time Pro Bowler. Basically, only the season that he didn't have 1,000 yards was his rookie year, and the year he got cut short due to injury. We only played 5 games. He's put up 1,300 or better in terms of yardage the past 6 seasons. 6 seasons. Again, but just the touchdowns are down, and that's kind of... Yards are great, but again, you don't get points for yards, you get points for touchdowns. So that's kind of where his situation is, and then obviously we ran through DeAndre Hopkins' numbers. So I think going to next year, just because I think... I don't know, plus DeAndre might have the best hands in the league, it's arguable. Not that Julio Jones' hands are bad. I don't know. I like DeAndre. So this is probably a little bit biased. But obviously I followed him. Not obviously, but I followed him. And from his time at Clemson with him, I think he was there with the Taj Boys, Sammy Watkins teams. Or he was, at least if they weren't all on the team at the same time together, they were all around the same time. That's when Clemson really got on the map, to me, at least. And then obviously they've had much more success. Not that they didn't have great success, but they won national championships and stuff after that. But yeah, so I'm going to go Julio 3. Just because, again, great season last year. But it's just, I don't know. The Falcons are just a weird team to predict from year to year. Obviously, we know he's going to be great. But everywhere else, you're just kind of not certain. And then, not that Matt Ryan was bad last year, but just like, he's also, 35, 36, something like that. So not that the decline should be coming, because if you see Brady, you would think no one's ever going to decline. But he was definitely a little shaky last year in terms of the interceptions. 26 touchdowns to only 14 picks. And even though last year, the year before that, he was pretty good, his win-loss and his numbers have been a little bit more shaky since Kyle Shanahan left. Post his one All-Pro and obviously the MVP season. And so it's a little dicey there. But, I mean, like I said, this probably is a little bit of bias, but again, all these people are interchangeable, so it is what it is. But yes, I'll probably go him at 3, Julio. DeAndre at 2. Just I think Kyler Murray's should have a lot of growth in the second year, and then obviously adding DeAndre Hopkins is going to add to that even more. And then Michael Thomas should be everyone's number 1, in my opinion, based off of what he did last year. I mean, having a season with almost 150 catches, having over 1,700 yards, catching 9 touchdowns. I mean, again, you can argue about he only catches short passes, blah, 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 just catches slants and stuff like that, which I get, but, I mean, he's getting open and he's catching them every time, so it's like, what would you prefer? He had 91 catches for first downs this past, I mean, obviously the most catches in the league, but he had 91 catches for first down. The next closest was, funny enough, Julio, and then DeAndre Hopkins was 3rd. So, again, those are the 3 guys that are going to be at the top of everybody's list, in my opinion. But again, when you have when you're a guy that gets targeted almost 200 times and you catch 80.5% of those balls, which is more than a vast majority of your compatriots, it's hard to argue against that. Like, no other receiver has anywhere close to that kind of number from trying to do a quick little scroll through. Like, Godwin was high at 71. That's really about it. The other guys that are high, that numbers like that high, are tight ends and running backs, which obviously isn't the same thing because they're not getting the ball as far down the field. Like George Kittle, I guess George Kittle's the next closest receiver, you could say, to him. In terms of guys that got high volume, obviously, there's guys that got lower amount of balls, but those don't really count, in my personal opinion. So, yeah, like I said, if it were me, I would go Mike Thomas 1, DeAndre Hopkins 2, though that may be a little biased. Julio 3, 2 and 3 are probably are definitely interchangeable. I mean, yeah, 2 and 3 are interchangeable, but they're definitely 2 and 3 somewhere. Mike Thomas should be 1, and then 4 or 5, and however down is interchangeable. So 4, I'm putting Tide, Godwin, Mike Evans. I don't know who's going to be wide receiver 1 there. And then 5th, I'm putting Tyreek Hill. Though again, like I said, you could have, you could arguably have both Bucs receivers in 4 and 5, but you could have guys like Kenny Galladay, Odell potentially on a comeback, Devontae Adams, Keenan Allen, Amari. Maybe if you believe Courtland Sutton could take a jump, stuff like that. Now, obviously not including tight ends, but so yeah, there's a lot of people you can put at that 5th spot. I'm going Tyreek. Again, the speed is just no, I don't know if one receiver has a trump card like Tyreek Hill with the speed. Because again, no matter where he is, no matter what the score is, no matter where you are on the field, you have to account for that speed. Again, you have to account for Mike Thomas, who's going to catch everything. Same with DeAndre and Julio and stuff like that. But if you have a guy that can literally run past your entire defense on any given play, that's a trump card that most other receivers just don't have. And I think that is enough to bring him in at 5. But again, who knows what's going to happen. Those are just my opinions. If you have different opinions, please share them. I would love to hear them. I'd love for you to tweet them at us, put them on Facebook, post them on Facebook, respond to us, whatever. However you want to reach us, feel free to reach us. Put in when you leave a review, comment about how my top 5 is all screwed up. Please. I will not be hurt one bit. So if you want to discuss that, want to discuss players being outspoken on social issues in sports, I'm willing to talk about that. If you want to talk about what's happening to minor leaguers in the MLB, I'm welcome to talk about that. If you want to talk about why Jadeveon Clowney hasn't been signed, please feel free. I'm willing to talk about that. I'm willing to discuss any of that with you because I love to talk about sports. If you love to talk about sports, we can talk about sports together. So, yeah. That'll do it for me here today on the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by GSMC Podcast. Now, we want to thank you guys, as always, for listening. If you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast. If you enjoyed what you've heard today, enjoyed what you've heard on past episodes, please subscribe, make sure you never miss an episode. Also, if you could please as well give us a 5-star rating, write us a review. Very appreciated, very helpful. See what you guys like, what you guys dislike, the ways you can improve, all that fun stuff. And like I said, if you're on social media, find us Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I know, again, states are starting to open back up, but for all the essential workers that have to work through the pandemic, give you guys a shout out every episode. I want to continue doing that until this is over and there's no real end in sight. So it'll keep going for a while. So the nurses, doctors, grocery store workers, delivery people. I know I've been using doing a little bit of online shopping recently. I imagine most people have as well. And so shout out to those people because without them, stuff wouldn't get brought to our house and we just wouldn't be able to get anything. Same thing with like the Instacart and all those other different services people use to do their grocery shopping if they don't want to expose themselves to the grocery store or convenience store or whatever. So shout out to all those people that work there. I know it's been a lot of stress, been a lot of dealing with people, which cannot always be a fun thing to do, but someone has to do it, and I appreciate you guys being willing to step up and take on that burden because I know it's definitely not always a rewarding job or a lucrative job, depending. So, shout out to you guys. But that'll do it for me here today. I have been Chris Blades. I want to thank you once again for taking the time out of your day to listen to me talk about sports. And until next time, peace out.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.